Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping straight into the wonderful, highly addictive, and, let's be real, occasionally maddening world of crochet. From pulling up your very first loop to finally fixing those frustrating, warped edges, we are going to break down exactly how to set yourself up for absolute success.
Okay, let's be totally honest here for a second. Has your nice, neat, rectangular blanket ever mysteriously morphed into a hexagon? Or maybe a triangle? Look, I see you. This is an incredibly common crafting struggle. You know the drill, you get into a rhythm, you're happily stitching away, watching TV, and suddenly your project has taken on a life of its own. It can be super frustrating, but I promise you it is entirely fixable once we understand the actual mechanics of the craft.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our roadmap for the journey. First, hook and yarn basics. Second, building your first stitches. Third, decoding patterns in charts. Fourth, mastering tension and gauge. And finally, fixing common mistakes.
All right, starting off with Section 1, Hook and Yarn Basics, Gearing Up for Success.
You know, starting with the right materials prevents a massive amount of beginner frustration. A lot of people think all yarn is created equal. It's absolutely not. If you're just starting out, you need a medium worsted weight yarn, usually a size 4, in a smooth, light color. Why? Well, because you literally need to see the anatomy of your stitches. Dark, fuzzy yarns or novelty stuff like velvet completely hide your stitches. You're just going to end up guessing where to put your hook, splitting the yarn, and probably giving up. So start with a light, smooth acrylic or cotton and pair it with a medium hook like a 4 or 5 millimeter. Seriously, give yourself the gift of visibility.
And this brilliantly illustrates your two main grip options when it comes to holding your hook, the knife hold and the pencil hold. With the knife hold, your hand rests right over the handle, thumb on one side. This is fantastic for keeping your wrists aligned and applying a bit more force if you're using thicker yarn. The pencil hold is, well, exactly what it sounds like, pinched right between your thumb and index finger. This grip gives you amazing precision for detailed work. There's literally no wrong way here. Just experiment with both and see whichever one naturally feels best for your hands.
Moving right along to Section 2, Building Your First Stitches, Laying the Foundation of Your Fabric.
Once you have a comfortable grip, it's time to actually construct the fabric using these core building blocks. Everything in crochet stems from these fundamental movements. You begin with a slip knot to secure the yarn to your hook. Then you create your chain stitches. This is literally the backbone of your project. And please count these carefully because if your starting chain is off, your whole project is doomed from the start. Next is the slip stitch, mostly used to join rounds together without adding any extra height. And finally, the bread and butter, the single crochet. You insert your hook, pull up a loop, yarn over, and pull through the 2 loops on your hook. Master these, and you can make almost anything.
Next up, Section 3, Decoding Patterns and Charts, Translating the Secret Language of Crochet.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is it addresses why written patterns can sometimes look like absolute gibberish. The biggest trap is that the English-speaking crochet world is divided into 2 distinct languages, US terms and UK terms. A single crochet in the US is physically the exact same stitch as a double crochet in the UK. Crazy, right? If you follow a UK pattern using US techniques, your project will end up wildly distorted and way too tall. So always check the designer's notes to see which terms they're using before you even begin.
To bypass that whole text-heavy language barrier entirely, many designers use crochet charts. A crochet symbol is this brilliant visual shorthand that actually mimics the physical look of the stitch. So, a chain looks like a little oval. A single crochet looks like a plus sign or an X. Utilizing these visual maps frees you from those giant walls of text, which is a lifesaver, especially if you're working on complex lace or intricate geometric patterns. It gives you a literal bird's eye view of your fabric.
So how do we read these? Well, it's just about understanding the flow. First, you locate the starting chain foundation. If you're working flat rows, you read row 1 from right to left, and then row 2 from left to right, kind of snaking your way up. If you're working in rounds like for a hat, you start dead in the center and spiral outward counterclockwise. Taking a quick moment to trace this path with your finger before picking up your hook is honestly like studying for a test before taking it. It sets you up for total confidence.
All right, Section 4, Mastering Tension and Gauge, Achieving the Perfect Fit and Feel.
Let's move to and see how this builds, because tension is simply how tightly or loosely you hold the yarn as it flows through your fingers. But have you ever made a gauge swatch, counted your stitches perfectly to match the pattern's width, but when you measure the height, your rows are way too short? It's so frustrating. You change your hook size, but then your width gets totally messed up. So what on earth is going on here?
Well, the secret lies in something called the golden loop. The golden loop is the very first loop you pull up right after inserting your hook into a stitch. This single, tiny loop is the master key that ultimately dictates the height of your entire row. We all handle this loop a little bit differently, which is exactly why row gauge can vary so wildly between two different crocheters using the exact same yarn and hook.
Because of this golden loop, crafters generally fall into 3 tension profiles. First up, we have the riders. Their golden loop rests perfectly evenly on top of the fabric, making standard height rows. Next, the yankers. They pull the working yarn tight right after that first loop, restricting its height and resulting in much shorter rows. And finally, the lifters. They actively pull that golden loop up high before finishing the stitch, making much taller rows. Now, none of these are bad or wrong, but knowing if you're a yanker or a lifter allows you to consciously adjust the height of that specific loop so you can match a designer's row gauge perfectly.
So, the crucial point here is that consistency is everything. Whether you naturally pull tight or lift high, doing it the exact same way on every single stitch is what creates beautifully straight, uniform edges. That neat, professional finish, whether checking your gauge swatch or edging a blanket, is the direct result of consistent tension in the golden loop.
Which brings us to our final stop, Section 5, Fixing Common Mistakes, or How to Avoid a Trip to Frogtown.
Let's tackle those sneaky little shape-shifting errors that can completely warp a project. First, skipping your turning chain at the end of a row. This deprives their next row of its necessary height and causes the edges to pull inward and slant. Second, missing the very last stitch of a row because it's slightly hidden. Do this enough times and your beautiful square scarf will absolutely turn into a narrowing triangle. Third, not using stitch markers. Pop a marker in the first and last stitch of every row and you'll never lose your place. And finally, leaving a tiny tail of yarn when you finish. Always leave 5 to 6 inches or your project will inevitably unravel in the wash. Trust me on that one.
But hey, if you do make a mistake, well, as we crafters say, welcome to Frogtown. We call it frogging because when you have to unravel your work, you rip it. Get it? Look, it happens to absolutely everyone. You might mindlessly crochet for 20 minutes only to realize you added an extra stitch 10 rows back. It's a completely normal part of the learning process. Just take a deep breath, frog it back, and try again.
So, I want to leave you with this final thought. Which crochet mistake have you made the most? Was it the shrinking borders, the incredibly tight tension, or maybe getting caught by the mystery of the UK versus US terms? Reflect on your own crafting journey. Be patient with your hands as they learn these new motions, and whatever you do, never give up too quickly. Keep practicing those stitches, keep counting those rows, and next time you look at a cozy sweater or a blanket, ask yourself, what hidden mechanics and golden loops are holding it all together? Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you in the next explainer.